Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Bring the noise.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Etims podcast. I'm Desmond, and tonight I'm joined by Monty C. Burns. Good evening, Monty.
Evening, Desi. Evening, lads.
Thank you for joining. We're also joined by Hector Bandido. Good evening, Hector.
Evening, guys.
And from down in Stoke, we're joined by Ralph Malf. Good evening, Ralph.
Evening. How's doing?
Good to have you back with us. Sadly, it is. We're gathered today, just to celebrate the life and personality of Bertie Auld, who sadly passed away this week. He's died aged 83. So hopefully we'll cover Bertie's career, basically his times with Celtic and beyond, and bring back a few memories and a few thoughts from ourselves and a few of the Etims followers, as well as a few pieces that we've grabbed from out there for everyone to enjoy and to help with their appreciation of Bertie's life and what he gave for us as Mr. Celtic's personality. Okay, let me just quickly start. Again, thanks guys for joining. Let me just start with a wee quick roll of honour for Bertie, the player and the manager, right? Bertie won a European Cup, of course, but also 5 league titles, 3 Scottish Cups, and 4 League Cups with 2 spells with Celtic. He only got a few caps for Scotland, but hopefully that's a long story, as we all know. Hopefully that's improved, given the number of Celts and former Celts in last night's Scotland game. As a player, he was at Celtic, then Maryhill Harp, I think, then Celtic, then went out to Dumbarton on loan, then ended up away to Birmingham, then came back to Celtic and then on to Hibs. Scored 90 goals in 328 games, which is actually a very good scoring record. I never realised he was that much a scorer, to be honest. And then as a manager, we'll come on to it in a second, but I personally, can't remember him seeing him in person, but I do remember him seeing him like Scott Sport at the kind of results with his sheepskin coat and the headwear and the cigars. He managed Partick Thistle for 6 years, then Hibs for 2 years, Hamilton Accies for 1 year, back to Thistle and then Dumbarton. So quite a big life in football, indeed. So again, we're just here to commemorate and celebrate Bertie's life. Ralph, you as the elder statesman of Etims, did you meet him personally? Did you have any great memories of Bertie?
I had a couple of meetings with him. The first time was when John Harston scored a hat-trick against Dundee United. It was the first game I took the kids to. They were all away at the time, and I was walking in the club shop trying to get, scarves, hats, the usual kind of thing. And he came over talking to us, which to me it was Bertie Auld. It was a hero, somebody that I'd grown up idolising. And to the kids, it was just a guy that was flinging stuff on the trolley, and he was putting hats on them and scarves and saying, "Oh, you look grand in that wee man. You look great in that wee man." And I ended up at the till with a big bill. And Bertie, but that was the kind of guy he was. At Lisbon Airport, he became a complete legend as a man to me. We'd flown in just before the official plane. And as we were stood wandering about trying to get our bearings and find the bar, the team came in and the Lions came in as well. And we knew they were down at the National Stadium the day after. This was Benfica 2007. And I get sort of huddled forward to ask Bertie, because you knew you could approach him, what time they were down at the ground. And he didn't know. Over Billy McNeil, and I think Willie Wallace came over as well, and they're talking. The way you felt was you were just talking to some other Celtic fans, but all the time in the back of my mind I was talking to 3 Lions, and it was incredible. And that was him. He just made you feel completely at ease, completely just like another Celtic fan. I was amazed.
Yeah, I actually remember you almost crying when you told me that story about being in the superstore and how basically, I don't know if Bertie was working on commission back in the days. I remember you felt as if you'd been mugged with a smile. The nicest mugging in the history of Parkheads. And Hector being from the East End would know about quite a few of those, no doubt. What about you, Monty? Did you meet him at all?
Yeah, a couple of times. The one that probably sticks out was he was just mingling outside Celtic Park, and everyone, similar to Ralph's story, you've always that little thing in the back of your head, they always talk about, you shouldn't meet your heroes and all that, and just the humility of the guy and the wisecracking of him was what stood out. And the same thing, you're standing in the presence of I think someone called him today, or read it today, like, he embodied the spirit of Celtic, and you could tell that the man, even at that late stage in his life, he just lived and breathed Celtic. His entire life rotated and revolved around the club. And I watched another little clip on him just recently, in the last day or two, with it was a BBC Sport interview where he just talked about missing his friends, and it kind of strikes you just that he's just a human being like the rest of us, but he was wisecracking away. I think that renowned story of them looking at the Inter Milan players and him saying, but could you play? I think that might have been one of the ones he just had on repeat, because someone was asking him about memory, and I remember him talking about that. But he just came across as a very fun guy, the Gallus nature and the wisecrack, a bit of a wind-up merchant. And I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff today. Willie Hawkey did an interview. I don't know if you've seen that on Go Radio. No. He told two unbelievably funny. They're almost like really terrible jokes, but they're just funny. One about Noel Gallagher and the soup. Did you catch that?
No, carry on. Remember it?
So it's okay. I'll not do Willie Hawkey, who's a big fan of the podcast. I'll not do him any disservice. There were two particular things he mentioned. He mentioned the story about Jimmy Johnson and Bertie Auld at a dinner he was hosting in Celtic Park, and was it when Jimmy's disease had kind of took, he's losing the power of his hands, and he asked Bertie Auld to go up and pick him up a bit of dinner, and Willie Hawkey tells the story, there was these lovely lamb chops on, and came down, finished it, and then Jinky said, "Here, will you go up and get us some more of those?" So Bertie Auld, as he would do for his friend, he went up and got more, and he was away for ages, and the next thing there was this whole commotion, and Bertie Auld was getting dragged out of the restaurant by the chef, and he's shouting down to Jinky, going, Jinky, that's all your fault." He says, "Why? I'm getting done with choplifting." Right? Really terrible. But the other one, the Noel Gallagher one, was brilliant. Similar thing. Bertie Auld at the table, everyone having a crack, and Noel Gallagher comes in all giving it loads, and Bertie Auld starts nudging Willie Hawkey, goes, "Go on up and tell him to get the soup. Tell him to get the soup." So Gallagher goes, "Fucking starving, what can I get?" Willie Hawkey says, "You have to try this soup, it's fucking brilliant." And Gallagher goes, No, I don't fancy something. He says, "No, seriously, go up and get the soup. I'm telling you, can't miss it." And Gallagher comes around with a bowl of soup, and Bertie Auld just reads his order and goes, "Here, do you want to roll with it?" And it's just fucking terrible. But you just see that big cheesy, teethy grin when he told the joke as well. So sorry, my apologies to Willie Hawkey for stealing two of his analogies into it, but my memory of the man was he just seemed like a really fun guy to be about.
Yeah, that was exactly. So we'll probably come on to that. Sorry, Ralph? No. So we'll probably come on to more of the jokes, but again, when you go through Twitter or even on YouTube, there's some of those brilliant ones. Hector, what about you? Did you ever enjoy meeting him?
I did. The first time I met Bertie was in Baird's Bar, of all places, which is no longer here with us, but for people of our vintage, it was a sort of part of your journey to from Celtic Park at some years in your grown up life. And I must have been my late teens, if even that, probably underage, say it now, into Bears before a game. It was 3 o'clock kickoff, and I can still remember it. And Bertie wasn't in Bears sitting there as a punter. Bertie was behind the bar in Bears, and the other person behind the bar, other people behind the bar, was obviously bar staff, but another person behind the bar also serving drinks was a certain Jimmy Johnston. So the first time I met Bertie Auld, I met him and Jinky, and I'm sure the two of them signed my t-shirts. They're serving pints. Could you autograph that? And I think I've got it somewhere stowed away. And he was serving and just cracking jokes, and the place, Bears was, guys, it was packed thereafter. But I just remember just seeing this guy in Jinky, serving, no doubt swigging a couple back at the same time, but laughing and joking all the time. You know, as if they were born to do that. And here they are, two Celtic football European Cup winning legends. Yeah. That was the first time. The second time was quite a number of years later. I was fortunate enough to play Football Aid at Celtic Park.
You're kidding. You never mentioned it.
I never mentioned it. But this was the Bertie Auld story. And so you get in before the game, it's the players' lounge, and we're all big in there, so we're all shaking yourself, right? Guys like us, novices, amateurs, and we're in the players' lounge, nobody really knows each other. And in comes Danny McGrain, in comes Bobby Lennox and Bertie Auld. And you can imagine, everyone's nervous enough, then it's just, my God. So Danny was my ultimate hero, but Bertie and Bobby, my God, you know, they're in on the top half dozen or so Celtic legends in my lifetime. And they're trying, you can see now looking back, they're trying to just calm people's nerves, and they're all buzzing, they're all cracking jokes and all that. And Bertie, as usual, he's commandeered the floor, and he's saying, right guys, this is it, breathe it in, you'll love it, this is Celtic Park, take it in, you're living the dream. I can't do the voice, you know, the bottom, you're living the dream, boys, this is it, right? And he's obviously, he's playing his game, but it's worked, we're all buzzing, you know, adrenaline pumping with the hairs in the back of the neck standing up. And then he says to Bobby, so Bobby, Celtic Park, Celtic, you must have scored a few goals for Celtic, Bobby, yeah? This is Bobby Lennox. I think Bobby's the top 3 of all time. I think he scored more than Henrik, Bobby Lennox. And Bobby goes, aye, Bertie, one or two. Oh, Bobby, don't be so modest about it. What, you scored 100? Bit more than that, Bertie, bit more than that. 200? Oh, Bertie, don't be daft. More than that. I think it's about 300 goals Bobby Lennox scored. And they turn round, and Bertie goes, so Danny McGrain, how many goals have you scored for Celtic? And Danny went, 9, right? Nobody knows Danny McGrain knows. I think it was lucky it was 2. And Bertie quick as a flash went, right, Danny, name them. And he went, I got 1 in training. I Tuesday in training, right? And we're all bursting out laughing. So the wee man had commandeered the floor, settled their nerves, and at the same time settled on nerves, but also made it even better occasion. So that was one of the finer experiences. But it was just a pleasure to meet the guy, see the guy in action. Yeah.
It's interesting morning, like mentioning Willie Hockey, and then yourself mentioning Birds and Jinky also in Birds, because again there was that wee kind of period. We don't need to cover that period, but it seemed to be kind of the respect for the Lions get picked up when Martin and Neil came back, and I know Willie Hockey was very much involved behind the scenes and helping everything. So it was good to know they get back to the kind of getting the respect they deserved, especially from within the club. But just talking about Birds Bar, let me just read out this story from Hugo Scavlacci on Twitter. Right, this is a cracker, and I think this sums it up. From Hugo, memories of Bertie. I plucked up the courage to ask wee Bertie for a photo in Jerez the day before the Porto final. He shouted over a Spanish barman and asked him to take 2 photos for us both, of us both together. He asked me my name and if I knew where Bird's Bar was, and could I get one of the pictures up to him. I was totally made up that he wanted a picture of us together. Bertie then added that they were having problems with rats, and a picture of a wee ugly cunt like me would scare them all away. And again, that's kind of also, I think, personifies that whole kind of Glasgow Gallusness. You know what I mean? That kind of the quip and cutting you at the heat, cutting you at the ankles, and just bringing you back to earth in a good way. I don't mean that in a cheeky. There was nothing snidey about him. You know what I mean?
He did it with a smile. You know, that glint in the eye and you know the kind of smile on the face and the wee wink towards you.
Aye, but there was never any like kind of evil, like even any like kind of. I've personally, maybe somebody out there has get memories of this, but I can't remember him like saying anything bad about anybody. If you know what I mean, it was just, I mean, like, you know, taking a piss at a Rangers. I was looking at the clips. Of him when he's talking about being in, and I think it's in Birds. He's doing a wee stand-up routine. Basically, he says he remembers being at the tunnel waiting to go out, and John Gregg walks up and stands next to him or something. And John Gregg's like, "How you doing, you man? You all right?" And he's like, "No bad." And John Gregg turns around all high and mighty and goes, what's your bonus today? And Bertie Auld goes, £3. And John Gregg goes, we're on £6. And Bertie Auld goes, aye, but we're fucking guaranteed £3. I mean, so it's that wee kind of thing. Don't try and push it, because I'll cut you down at every opportunity. And it's that. So it's like that kind of. What I was also wanting to cover was the whole kind of, like, we never really go to see him play or really even manage, but it's the kind of the personality and the Gallusness. And like I'd written down here, if he was only 5'6", but he was a true giant in personality. Celtic and Glasgow personified in this wee 5'6" ball of energy. If Stein was the brain, Jinky the skill, Billy the class, then Bertie was the wit, the tongue, and the personality. And personally, I think he'd like grown up. Again, you kind of missed the lines, but grown up and seen him. He kind of put the us in Gallus. I think he made all Celtic fans feel better about themselves. There's some players that are great, but don't have that kind of direct association. You could maybe even, like, for want of a better comparison, you could say, oh, Chris Sutton, we all appreciated what he done, but he's not got that kind of, he didn't make us feel like I think Bertie did. I think he made us all feel a wee bit better amongst ourselves, a wee bit bigger personalities. And I think, and Monty, you coming from across the water, you can let me know if this rings any bells or you don't agree or whatever. I also think it kind of helps. I also think it kind of ties in with the kind of rise of the whole kind of Celtic kind of working class people over the years. He kind of gave us that bit of be proud of yourself, don't hide under a bushel, don't cower, don't kind of try and stay to the shadows, stand up and walk forward. And I mean, like, don't be scared into my land. Just show them that you're better than them. Does that make sense? Aye,
I think supporters by and large, you gravitate to the glitzy or the glamorous, the super striker or the really top quality player, or the player that maybe embodies your own beliefs and your own sense of identity. And I think that, I seen another comparison today between I think it was Colin McGregor and Scott Brown, and someone saying, he doesn't really live up to what I would expect in a captain. And you get into debate and discussion, going, what do you mean? And they were talking about personality, where you look at Bertie Auld, and Bertie Auld epitomised that, I guess, that generational thing, as you point out, Desi, that you're growing up almost like without getting the chip on the shoulder, not a second-class citizen in that regard, but you are part of a society that does have you kind of in a bracket below. And that notion of, fuck them, you can stand up to this and you can break through it. Not only that, you're every bit they're equal. You have nothing to be feared of.
Yep.
And that resonates hugely. And I think that's why we like that wee bit of fire and that wee bit of Gallus in our kind of our icons, our heroes, if you want. And I agree, Desi. I think Bertie Auld would have epitomised that. In more modern times, Brown has a bit of that about him, and I think that's why we all collectively loved him as well. Gallus, cocky, but not over the top, not arrogant, and somebody you can relate to. And I think there's a huge gap there now. If you look at from Bertie Auld's generation to now, there hasn't been that many of them that you could say were really truly tuned into sort of fan sentiment and identity. And I think there's a huge gap there for the club, that notion of the spirit of the club.
See, with Bertie, so I was just going in, and you made an interesting point there, Monty. And I'd read a couple of comments, like we all have, Twitter the last few days, and somebody had asked that question about who picks up the torch from Bertie in terms of a Celtic player who can relate to the fans, who has kind of got his spirit, his passion. And I had one or two folks say, well, not right now, he's still playing football, but Scott Brown. And I had one or two going, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wait a minute here. If Bertie Auld was still here and could talk to people, most of them I didn't see him play. The devilment, as they call it, that Bertie had. And just to be clear, what I mean by that is that Bertie wasn't slow in putting one on a player. That nowadays, would have seen multiple red cards, far worse than any modern day player would do. On the ball, off the ball. That was part of his. It was part of how a lot of the guys played back then. But it was no shrinking violent. He'd put them on the shin and put the fist in a couple of chins as well. That was part of Bertie's background. But just what was interesting with him is he was from Maryhill, right? And I don't know if anybody knows kind of where Maryhill is, to the north of Glasgow, but it's Panmure Street, so it's sort of Hamilton Hill, Postle, Maryhill. But where he grew up was literally a stone's throw for Firhill, for Partick Thistle's ground. And Thistle was his team as a kid. I mean, say a team, used to get lifted over into matches of the turnstiles. But as Desi articulated at the start, became a Celtic, signed for Celtic, then became a Celtic man. But his first love wasn't Celtic. And I find that, for me, that even adds more. It's like the Jock Stein thing, if that makes sense. The Danny McGrain is guys that Celtic wasn't their first love. And yet, to grow such a passion for the club, and they can share that passion and energise people, I think that's just marvellous. And I don't think there was anybody as good as Bertie sharing that love and the core values of what he thinks Celtic meant to him and should mean to us. So, yeah.
No, it's true. It's interesting. It's interesting to say that because I never really covered the times I'd met him. Strangely, the first time I'd met him was in Sheffield B&Q, where he told me to go, let me jump the queue when I was in buying paint a long time ago. For some nut when you suddenly, some guy goes, in you go, son. And it's not until you're waiting to walk by him, you suddenly realise you know that voice. And it was him. But it was also, the last time I saw him personally, I was at a funeral for Greta, a dear family friend who'd passed away. And I was in St Bridget's Chapel in Tory Glen, and that way suddenly you hear somebody singing behind you, and you kind of think, I know that voice sounds familiar, but you're too polite to turn round. And I'm hearing the responses to the psalms, etc. I'm hearing somebody singing in the chapel. Eventually, the coffin's getting let out, and as I turned round, and sure enough, not why suddenly your brain clicks into gear and you realise who it was, and there's Bertie there, and I kind of that way, you still look at him like you're a wee boy, and I kind of looked, and it just kind of gave me that look of show some respect, so to speak, and this kind of nodded his head. This all took part like a nanosecond, and then we went outside, everybody's saying hello and all that. And all Bertie, God bless him, all he was interested in was praising Greta. And she was a lifelong, she was the same. She came from Firhill. They'd known each other since they were kids, I think. Because I don't know if you remember, Hector, but that was the time we were looking over Twitter, trying to get an official Partick Thistle tie at the time. I don't know if you remember, it was a few years back. And we were trying to, because Greta and she'd been a lifelong Partick Thistle fan. And God bless Partick Thistle, I think they came good. All Bertie one day was actually great. You know that way, so the Firhill ties were still strong. And I know I don't mind he done that kind of going back to your roots. I know he done a wee kind of documentary when he was outside, I think outside the close, where his close was and stuff. And they do say it was literally a stone's throw from Firhill.
Well, just on Firhill, one of the first food bank collections was actually at Firhill when Thistle played Celtic. And those involved, and we know a couple of the guys who've done it in the podcast before who've been involved in the various food bank initiatives in Glasgow. But Bertie came along to offer his support, and turns up, doesn't just turn up, he opens up his car and his boots packed with food. Nothing publicised, we just know about it because of folk we'd seen and met through Twitter and other things. There's the boot full of food. So he's, it's kind of, one will attend to try and do what I can do to help, and two, by the way, you take that as well. It's just I think the nature of how the guy was and how he understood and cared about the communities that he came from. Yeah.
Definitely. Ralph, one of the things that struck me, even though strangely these things you never put two and two together, he was only 5'6", but he's just like a giant personality.
Certainly a giant compared to Ralph. Do you know?
Oh, come on. We've never seen Ralph sitting down, to be fair. Or no, that's
Ralph's high heels.
No, that's actually a lie. I'm saying I've only seen Ralph sitting down. I've actually seen Ralph try and climb into the main stand. Every time I used to get texts on my phone, and it would be, "Are you in your seat?" And I would turn around, and sure enough, there would Ralph would be like, "What would War's End?" He would be over to the left, trying to get into our Tron Sangme's division, and he would never manage it. To be fair, we wouldn't allow it. You know what I mean? But yeah, Ralph, I'm saying it kind of surprised me because you just imagine these people are like giants personality, but also you imagine they were like big kind of players, not to be so successful. I mean, like Hector especially, like we've got the whole Xavi and Iniesta and Messi. I mean, like people have a go, they're only 5'7", and then you've got we've got our very own Bertie Auld and Jimmy Johnsons. I mean, they were only actually 5'6". It just struck me as very strange. I just didn't realise. I mean, but before I forget, Ralph, I don't know if you've got it at hand, and this is touching on something I'd kind of talked about on Twitter the other night. I don't know if any of you guys here, Monty or Hector, if any of you caught Top Gear on Sunday night, or you've managed to catch it in between. Again, right, so Top Gear for the first 20 minutes was all about supercars and the usual nonsense, nothing of interest. But then Paddy McGuinness turns around and says, they cut back to the studio, so to speak, and they go, okay, Paddy, you've got something to show us. You've got a small film to show us. And Paddy McGuinness starts this show, and it starts with a wee show of, remember the Evel Knievel wind-up toy?
Yeah.
Remember that? So it's Evel Knievel wind-up toy. And Paddy McGuinness starts talking about Evel Knievel and how that was, everybody loved him back in the 70s, etc. But in Britain, and as a young boy in Bolton, Paddy McGuinness loved Eddie Kidd. And I don't know if you will remember Eddie Kidd. Remember Eddie Kidd? Right? I think, especially Hector, I think you.
That was England's Evel Knievel, wasn't it?
Exactly, right. And so then they do a film about Eddie Kidd, and again, bear with me, folks, please. I hope this is worth it. They do a film about Eddie Kidd and his exploits and how he was like a kind of superstar. Him and Barry Sheen, remember back in the day? But Eddie Kidd. But so once they've shown you the kind of footage of Eddie Kidd jumping the buses and blah blah blah, and he beat Evel Knievel's son in a jump off and stuff, and you're like, that's very good. Paddy McGuinness then turns to the camera and goes, I didn't just want to celebrate Eddie Kidd. I wanted to meet Eddie Kidd and tell him how much he meant to me. And then they show you Eddie Kidd's last jump, where he just jumps a 50-metre jump, and something goes wrong and he hits his head on the petrol tank of the motorbike and ends up with brain damage. And now he lives in the southeast. He's got a carer. He's got brain damage. But Paddy McGuinness goes and sees him and talks to Eddie Kidd in its own camera. And I recommend it to everybody. It's a beautiful, wonderful piece of television. It'll break your heart, but it's a beautiful way to break your heart, because Eddie Kidd just smiles with pure joy when they come and see him. And then they take Eddie Kidd out in a big, lovely Rolls Royce, take him to this area, and suddenly all these people who he's inspired, all these bikers go by, and then all these people turn up who are all like champions at motocross and motorbikes, etc., and they all put on a display for Eddie Kidd and his family. And it's wonderful. But what I was trying to say, Ralph, coming to you, because you wrote a piece when Bertie was Bertie's family confirmed they had dementia back in June, I think it was, and you wrote a piece praising Bertie. And I'm getting to the fact that should we try and appreciate our heroes and let them know how much we love them and what they mean to us while they're with us, rather than always having to this day these in memoriams, these tributes. Should we try and make sure we praise them as often as we can? Because that thing you wrote back in June was fantastic, and I'd recommend everybody tries to read it. Have you got it at hand at all? You can maybe read it, Ralph.
Not to hand.
From it.
Effectively, what I was saying was, look, the family are maybe feeling down, and I'm not for a minute presuming to read the stuff that I put out, but I was kind of hoping that they would read it. And more than that, I was hoping that people would put in their own memories, their own thoughts, their own good wishes, just so that perhaps, when they were feeling down, they could read it and realise what we felt about them, realise the place they held in our affections, and that, when the disease had been diagnosed and when he was fine, it wasn't by himself. There were people thinking about him, and maybe just something that he could read, or somebody who knew him would read, and it would put a wee smile on their face in what would have been extremely difficult times. And on the whole, I think people should do more of that about anybody that they feel anything about, because I think there's an awful lot of people that pass on that maybe when they've gone, you feel like you've not perhaps told them what you thought of them, or perhaps told them how you felt about them, and it can leave a regret there that shouldn't be. And I think Bertie knew how he felt about him, and I think maybe he saw in the supporter what he was himself, and that was why he could identify, and he was so easy to talk to, and he felt we were easy to talk to. Because don't forget, we haven't been a footballer, and I think Hector covered this with that Football League game. He would have also felt that, maybe these people don't want to talk to me, maybe they'll see me a different way, but he broke down all those kind of barriers. And as for somebody picking up the torch, I don't think there will be. For me, when I found out, that he passed on, it was different from everybody else that I'd sort of grown up admiring, because I felt like I knew him. Even though I'd only met him a couple of times, spoke to him for maybe half an hour combined, it was different because he was one of us, one of our own. From the same part of the world as us, with the same dreams and ambitions. He just got to realise them. Simple as that.
Yeah. Monty, there has been talk. I've seen somebody actually proposing that great picture that we see of the Lions walking out onto Lisbon. I think it's been colorised that over the years. Highland Paddy's got a version that's fantastic, the whole team walking out. And people are talking about that. Maybe that would be a nice fitting tribute on the Celtic way. We've got a few standalone statues at the moment. Can I actually have a full team one? I've just put in your chat the iconic picture of Bertie in his hat with his top off. I mean, like it's when we think these kind of images are like kind of modern things. No, your Ronaldos and your Messis and all that, and even get back to Maradona. But then you see like Bertie Auld with his top off. I think is that at the post Leeds game. He's got the top off. I mean, and it's, I mean, like it doesn't get more iconic than that. All right, we'll get Caesar with the big cup, but that's just the actual. I mean, like post game, it's quite stunning.
Yeah. I think some form of. I know we've the Celtic way looks fantastic now, and it's unfortunate that and as it becomes more decorated, it means that huge or significant parts of our history are moving into the shadows, but I do think something like that, something iconic for that entire team at an appropriate point is the right thing to do. Because I mean, you accept the realities of modern football and where we are. We're probably never going to get to that pinnacle again. If we did it again, it would be something short of a miracle. So no, I think somehow we find a way to keep evolving as a club, but keep these types of these icons very much front and center. So I'd like to see something like that in the Celtic way, but it's a cracking walk up to Celtic Park now, and it does give you a sense of just how iconic the football club is.
There's also the bit at the top of the ground where they've got the pictures and the images. That picture would sit nice all the way across the top of there. Statues are strange things because they never look like who they're supposed to be, and that's maybe why, actually, I'm defeating my own argument here, because that's maybe why that picture would look good, because everybody would know immediately what it was.
Yeah.
But they've got a stand called the Lisbon Lions stand. So surely if you're going to put it up, you put it up on the Lisbon Lions stand.
Aye. Yeah. And there's a timing thing for that too, Hector. I think there's an appropriate point in the future when you would do something like that, when that last link to that particular team is gone. And one by one, I guess, as time progresses and the inevitable happens, we have these conversations and then probably reset the entire sort of thought process on the club as to just how iconic that moment was. But you'd love to think that, at some point again in the future, we could reach a pinnacle and have that type of connection that was so obviously there with that team. And you hear it even now. They all talk about the born within 10, 11 miles radius of each other and never be done again. It's a unique thing in world football. And that's not to be over egging it. And I don't know that any football club could ever do that again. So it's right that we have them very much front and centre of how we celebrate our history.
Yeah. It's not just there were genuinely 4 or 5 world-class players in that team.
Yeah.
Whatever way you want to look at it. And I'm sure I saw Peter, somebody, and Alan Ruff, they do a kind of chat show thing.
Yeah, man.
And they asked him a question, and Bertie said there were 4 world-class players, and of course he left himself out, which again is part of that arrogance, confidence, but actually deep down he's kind of a humble man. Again, it's maybe the passing of an era and a type of player or a type of personality that played the game at the highest level, because I don't think there's been anything like him.
I think the other, sorry, Ralph, I think the other connection, this is maybe for those now. I never seen Bertie play for Celtic in live, because I'd seen him all the video footage, but I was too young. I was literally, I think I was 2 years old or something once he'd left Celtic. But the connection, and this is where you pass it on through generations, but I grew up probably like you guys, either through a parent or an uncle or someone, I felt as if I'd seen Bertie play because of the stories that my dad had told me about the Lions, about the guys before the Lions. So see that torch where you've got the connection. And I think that's what makes Celtic special and people like Bertie special, because he would always tell the stories, the anecdotes about the great players and Celtic, what it means to Celtic. And even listening to all of us talking just now, and I think, Monty, your point about Celtic will never do this again, which, by the way, every bit of common sense says you're right. But if Bertie Auld, we had this conversation with him a few years ago, what do you think Bertie would have said to you saying that?
Fucking wise up.
He'd have told you, behave yourself. Of course we can do it again, son. Of course we can do it again.
Put your teeth back in, Bertie.
That's it.
No, Hector, to you, a wee question to you. I've got down here that the patter, he was Celtic's Billy Connolly, if we didn't already have Billy Connolly. But so with Bertie, then we had like Tommy Burns, that kind of quick wit, that banter, stroke patter ability, the whole kind of Glasgow banter, for want of a better phrase. So who's going to be next, do you think, then? Paul Lambert?
I think it's based on the players I see now. It's not Glasgow. I think it'll be Bruni in about 10 years' time. When he becomes the elder statesman, he's in his mid-40s or whatever, I think he'll become the man, because he's got his laptop. But Bruni's got the devilment, right? He's got the devilment. He was a legend. He's a hero. And by the way, going to be players who go to Celtic Park for the first time in their life, he's the guy that's always was always the first to greet them, tell them all about the club. Another man at Celtic wasn't his first love. And I think he's the natural successor. But you're right, usually it's a Glaswegian, isn't it? It's usually somebody like Tommy Burns for the Carlton, Bertie from Mary Hill. I'm looking now, the game's moved on. I'm struggling to think, who from Glasgow that would be.
Again, maybe somebody will come through. Maybe because somebody always, maybe it's a case of somebody always comes through. It might skip a generation or two, that way.
Kieran Tierney when he comes back to Celtic in 10 years' time, maybe.
Sorry?
Kieran Tierney when he comes back to Celtic in 10 years' time.
Ralph is sure he's coming back at some point, you know what I mean? David Turnbull might develop a personality, we never know, you know what I mean? Right, okay, right, so the thing, right, so with Bertie the legend, the player, the won the European Cup, etc. But I would say on an equal status was his relationship with the fans. I mean, the way he was viewed with the fans and how beloved he was with the fans, and what he personified to us. So what I've asked to do is I've sent you all a wee kind of a couple of quips or a couple of quotes that I've asked people on Twitter and also in Ralph's.
Certainly wasn't a couple of quid.
Aye, it's in the post, as Bertie would say, it's in the post, son. So if I can ask, give me 1 second, if I can make this mouse work. If I can ask Monty to go first, if you don't mind, Monty. It's just reading out a few offerings we've had from the Celtic fans on Etims.
Sure. This one is from the Green Machine, and you're right, sir. They're right. My condolences to Bertie's family. They know we share their great loss, as we've all lost part of ourselves tonight. And I only hope they also know that the indomitable spirit personified by wee Bertie and the Lions will live on in each of us forevermore. They were the finest inspiration of every Celtic generation since. And the wee man's defiant bursting into the Celtic song in the tunnel in Lisbon can still bring a tear to my eye. Yet because I'm certain, bring a tear to my eye yet, because I'm certain that's what inspired the boys to their incredible feats that wild, ecstatic day under the gorgeous Portuguese sun. You were one in a million, Bertie, and will always remain a giant among men. My heart is broke, but legends like you never die. Love you, brother. The Green Machine. It's quite touching.
Excellent, thanks very much. Ralph, I believe you've got one from Jared McDade, who just helped write Jackie McNamara's latest book.
That's the one from down at the Greenock Supporters Club,
yep.
A place I have been known to frequent myself. Jerry says, Bertie told me once he had to leave at 10:30, so we did a quick question and answer at 10:15. Question 1, who was the best player he played with? I handed Bertie the mic, says Jerry, and he gave me it back 45 minutes later. Sincere, Gallus, hilarious, and a joy to be with. Rest in peace, Bertie.
I'm just wondering here. I'm reading it as you were saying it there. The fact that he said I had to leave at 10:30,
Yep.
Ben, I'm thinking, did Jerry miss a joke there? did maybe not get what he was saying? Hector, I think you've got one from JVR63 on Twitter.
Yeah, JVR's going to get a couple of parts here. First one, he goes, I met Bertie one Friday night in the Tesco in Dunmannock Road. He was on his way to a Charity Boys gig at the Barrowlands. His wallies, those not from this part of the world, wallies are your teeth. His wallies were loose and needed denture adhesive. I asked him if it was okay for a photo. He said, okay, as long as I wasn't in it, just him and my wife. Face with tears of joy. And just below that, he goes, he also, GVR also had the good fortune to be in Sean Fallon's company one night in the late 80s. He'd mentioned to Sean about when Bertie rejoined us. And Sean replied, all Bertie wanted was enough for a deposit for a house to re-sign for Celtic. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Magic, nice. I mean, it's interesting the fact that, again, we're talking about, was it Bob Kelly? We're talking there before, Hector, you were mentioning Bertie's enthusiasm, let's say, on the pitch.
Devilment was the word they used, devilment.
He's devilment on the pitch, and I think Bob Kelly was he was a wee bit uncertain about bringing him back because he didn't know if he played it in a gentlemanly fashion at times. But Jock Stein obviously had the vision to see exactly how that would work. Let me see what I've got here. I have
Bertie Auld and Nobby Styles, don't you?
Is that Ryman slang?
No, Nobby Styles, the English hard man. His last ever appearance in professional football, when he was put out of the game by Bertie Auld, Styles broke Bertie's collarbone, and Bertie's getting carried off and taken off. And he says to the referee, how long's left? And the referee told him, he says, put me back on. And then Styles was carried off. It must have been, there was a few stories. There was a Rangers hard man as well at the time, and I can't mind his name. And again, people were looking to Auld and this fella colliding. Auld never shot the challenge. To talk to the guy with a sense of humour, and he wasn't a big fella. You wouldn't believe the rod of steel that run through him.
Exactly, that whole fact. I keep coming back to the picture of somebody at 5'6". I know it's like maybe 50 years ago or something, but it's just amazing. Let's see what I've got here. I've got Judging EBT's Guilty, aka Aitkins Drum on Twitter. I saw my memories of Bertie. A beautiful woman coming down the stairs after the game. Bertie is at the foot of stairs chatting with fans. I'm at a distance. Anyway, he taps his cheek, obviously for a kiss from the woman. As the stunner leans in, quick as a flash, he turns his head and it's flush on his lips. They were both in stitches. So there's I don't know if you'd call that devilment, Hector, but certainly you can take the boy at a fur hill, that's for sure. And then I also got this, and this is quite interesting. It must be amazing, I think. It would be interesting. This is like talking about to your heroes while you can. It'd be interesting to get their perspective on modern football. Because I also noticed here, I bumped into Bertie after the game. I said to him, what did you make of that today? Geez, what a great rant he had about the Dons coming down to defend from the first minute. He was disgusted and utterly stunned. Aberdeen, they're better than that. That McInnes should be ashamed. I mean, that's quite interesting, you think, what it must be like to have been at the pinnacle of your game and then having to watch people like being rotten at it. I mean, that kind of idea. Quite interesting to me anyway. So, Monty, do you have anything else? You have one from Cartvale 88, I hope?
I do, yeah, from the Etims diary comments. And Cartvale writes, many things can be said about him, having met him over the years when he visited the neighbours in the Gorbals in the 60s for a bite to eat, to his skill and vision on the pitch, being able to slow a game down, to the man himself. Bertie was always a delight. Even one night when he had a flat tire, it wasn't a disaster. He was a glass full to the brim type of guy. He'll be missed.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good perspective, isn't it? A glass full to the brim type of guy. And Ralph, I think you've also got Andy for the diary.
Andy from the diary says, a few years ago, I was fortunate to bump into Bertie in my local Morrison's. As we chatted, I kept reminding myself, this guy's a legend, a Lisbon Lion who ran the show home and abroad in hundreds of massive games. I asked him what it was like to play in front of huge crowds, and specifically the European game against Leeds, 136,000. That was back in 1970, and Andy attended it when he was a wide-eyed 9-year-old. He said it was just a privilege to play in front of Celtic fans, full stop. What a legend, what a man. Rest in peace, Bertie.
Lovely. Again, that massive, the Leeds game, God knows if that will ever be. I don't dare say it will not be defeated now with various crowd regulations or etc. And Hector, I think you've got one.
That game. There's another story. Norman Hunter, who was the big hard man for England. He was obviously in the Leeds team. He would have been in direct opposition to Auld at the time. And there's a story about one of the Leeds players got a hefty challenge after Auld. And he says to Bertie, he says, "You need to watch. Hunter will be after you." And Bertie got up and says, "You'll need to be the white Hunter to get me, son." Again, that confidence, that almost arrogance in himself and his own ability and his own capability of handling whatever was thrown at him.
Definitely. Hector, I think you'll get one from the maestro. And
I don't think it's Paul McStay, this maestro, but it's certainly from another person labelled maestro. Maestro goes, "I'm nearly 50, been going to games since the mid-80s. Never came from a Celtic family. My parents were from Pakistan, so culture was different in our house. Anyhow, I was going to Celtic Park for a game. My pal gave me corporate tickets. I was walking up by the old ticket office, and the car pulls up. Out steps a wee guy. He looks up and shouts, 'All right, son,' starts chatting away. I was in awe. Bertie Auld is talking to me. Walk through the glass doors, and I could see people looking at us. Honestly, I felt like a superstar. Bertie never seen colour, didn't matter as it shouldn't. I'm blessed to have spent a few moments with him. May God show kindness and patience to the whole family. Love the Celtic.'"
Oh, lovely. Again, as well as Brighton having up on the pitch, it must and I know it sounds daft to praise the people in hospitality, etc. But that's why a lot of people go to hospitality, to see people like Bertie Auld and to see the stars of old. You know what I mean? That's the highlight of it. It's not a 3-course meal and a hospitality gift. You know what I mean? And the seats aren't that comfy, let me tell you.
Can I give you a wee story? And honestly, trust me, it's nothing to do with Football Aid, right? Trust me, nothing to do with Football Aid, right?
Now you'll get what started.
Did you play Football Aid?
It's a long story. We'll do a podcast about it in the future, right? No, this was one, and we've all would have heard this one before, but just for our one listener perhaps hasn't heard it. And it goes back to the time when Rangers went first of all Souness, then Walter Smith, and they'd done 9 in a row all the way through to about, I think they finished in 97, didn't they? Because Wim Jansen did 98, yeah. So it'd been a few years after that. They were looking back and going, right, that Rangers team who did 9 in a row against the Celtic team who done 9 in a row, and obviously the Lions were part of that 9 in a row. And the story was asked, and Bertie was one of the columnists at the time, and Bertie was asked, "So Bertie, what do you think? That Rangers 9 in a row team against your Celtic 9 in a row team, who do you think would win?" And Bertie pauses. "That's a tough one." It was, "I think Rangers would edge it, maybe 2-1. And the person, I talked about Stevie Station, BBC or STV, said, "Really? 2-1 to Rangers?" The guy, "Aye, but you must remember, son, we're on our 60s now."
Yeah.
That's and I've no doubt we'll find wee stories about what he said and wee clips of maybe on the radio or the TV that we've not heard before, because there's so many of them. The one that I hadn't heard was the Tam Cowan one, where he'd said he was going to tell Tam and Stuart Cosgrove something that that was unique, something that had never been said before about the Lisbon Lions. And of course, Cowan and that, they're all excited about it, and he's reeling him in. And he says, "One of the Lions was homosexual." I said, "What?" And of course, they two are thinking. And by then, you need to remember, he was a master storyteller, and he reeled them in nicely with it. And so, "Which one? You need to tell." "No, I can't tell you." "No, I'm not telling you." He says, "No, you need to tell us." He says, "All right, come here, I'll whisper it to you." And as he leaned in towards Cowan, he just planted a big kiss in his cheek. And I thought that was fantastic. I thought it was brilliant. It's like I said, it's the wee stuff that he obviously comes up with off the cuff. That little bit of what we all want to be. We all want to be witty. We all want to be sharp. We all want to be good at football. We all want to be that wee bit harder than what we actually are. And he was. So that's probably why we all looked up to him.
Yep, maybe the guy we all want to be. I will, for regards to comments from the Etims followers, the fans, I'll leave us with McClintock in the Etims diary comments. If ever a player summed up Glasgow, it must have been Bertie. Not the biggest, not the greatest, but Gallus enough to shrug both of them off and become known all over the world. I never got to see him play, unfortunately, but from all I've seen and heard, he could play all right. And yet, how is it that for generations who never saw him play, how has he achieved legendary status? Every story we told about Bertie just highlights how much the club meant to him. He was a winner and he wanted Celtic to win. Leading the team sing-song in the tunnel before the final in Lisbon, Bertie knew what he was doing. The Italians were supremely confident and maybe a few of his teammates were unsure. Don't think you could ever say that about Bertie. That one song probably set the tone for what was to come. Genius. Bertie was the never say die spirit of the team, and as a result of that, he'll never die in the hearts and minds of the fans, and the crack wasn't too bad either. The memory that sticks most in my mind about Bertie was when he was talking about the Lions who had passed away. Clearly emotional, he simply said, I missed them. Unfortunately today, Bertie, we are missing you, but say hello to the lads for us. And that just sums up, doesn't it? He's a legend. Live. Hector, you've mentioned there, the stories of Bertie and the experience of Bertie is passed on to us through generations, and it'll be the same as we pass it on through generations, as well as the other lines.
Yeah, I was just as you guys were talking, and you know how you gets the brain going again about things, and I was scribbling down a couple of my own wee things, but I think we covered about his background, Mary Hill, working class man, never forgot his roots. Just his dying day, that was part of how he was as a man. But I just think for me, not on the pitch but off it, it seemed to be come across as kind of humour, humility and passion was the three things that seemed to stand out with him. And I was just a couple of weeks ago, I was just saying, look, if we all know the world seems a bit polarised right now, doesn't it? It has been for a few years. Probably social media's got a large part to play with that. There seems to be a lot more anger out there, a lot more negativity, probably too much. But I would just say that I think if we could all be a wee bit more like Bertie Auld in our lives, a wee bit more like him in terms of how we treat people, bit of humour, bit of humility, I think the world would be a better place.
Aye, absolutely.
Yep, I'm just looking at. Did everybody see the graffiti that popped up in Maryhill with the Bertie Auld "Real Men Conquer Europe"?
Yep.
That was a nice modern touch, nice modern salute. Okay, so anyone else got anything else to add? I've got a wee outro to salute Bertie, a few quips of Bertie and a few phrases and a wee kind of special story to finish with. But anything else anyone would like to add? This is a closer here before we move on to the outro and the tribute.
There's talk about, obviously, you touched upon his nickname being 10:30. And obviously we play St Johnstone at Hampden on Saturday. They were at home the following weekend, aren't we? So there's talk that when the clock gets to 10 minutes 30 seconds, there might be a big rendition of the Celtic song, because that was his. It's our song, but Bertie's sung it all the time. So I think the whole stadium rocking to that just after 10 minutes and 30 seconds would be quite something to be part of.
It would also be nice to bring it back to the songbook, because all the songs have kind of died. Especially these are the songs that we kind of grew up getting used to. They've kind of died away a wee bit. I mean, you've got Mary Your Graces and Fields of Bath and Ryan. And nothing against them, obviously, but this would be nice to just hear the older songs.
It's made a comeback this season, no, Des. I've definitely noticed it being sung a lot more this season, which is a great thing.
Monty, anything for you?
No, I think just time for a wee bit of reflection and that notion of the gap that'll be left there, and to look forward and kind of celebrate what the man did. And hopefully we'll, as Hector touched on, maybe it's for Scott Brown to start filling that void in the decade ahead. God willing, we all see it.
Sorry, apologies, as Hector said, it's maybe for everybody to step up and help fill that void. I mean, as you say, I don't want to tempt fate here, but Ralph, I'm assuming, I've got a good feeling that the Green Brigade will probably come up with a tribute for our next home game. So we can look forward to that.
I think with the passing of Bertie, there's kind of the feeling that there's the passing of an era where footballers with working class backgrounds, they remained as friends to supporters. They're not, after they finished playing, they didn't retire to the countryside and breed horses. I think that perhaps when you see the likes of Bertie Auld and that generation, it becomes more apparent what the divide is now in the modern game. And it's a shame. It's a shame that it's went that way. And it's a shame that we've lost one of the greatest Celtic players, supporters that I can certainly think of this week.
Yep. No, that's the nice way to put it. Okay, folks, thanks very much for listening. I'm sure you've all got your own memories and your own way of appreciating Bertie. We will leave you with just a wee tribute we'll put together. Hopefully you enjoy it, and then we'll look forward to celebrating Bertie, as Hector mentioned there, at Hampden. Hopefully we have a victory in the semi-final and going to win the cup in his name, and also the next home game. Hopefully we'll have a good tribute, either on the 10:30 or even just through the whole game for Bertie Auld and the rest of the Lions and the rest of the great Celts who have gave us our club. All right, thanks for listening.
Holding us back, and they were up the first step. And Jimmy says, look, they're like films. I says, no, but can they play? And they were looking over as if to say, look at them, we were all Gallus, we were all walking and kind of sort of laughing and joking, hitting each other's shooters and that, And then it was just natural because we did it. Listen, if you can do it at Firhill, why not do it in Lisbon? For it's a grand old team to play for, and it's a grand old team to see. And if you know the history, it's enough to make your heart go, oh, oh, oh. And the rest is history. I think that beat them in the tunnel and we beat them in the parking lot.
A source has told me this joke. Supposedly it was at an end of season doing. Bertie Auld was at a table with Martin O'Neill. And it was quite awkward at the table at first, and nobody was speaking, so Bertie just pipes up and goes, do you like Doug's, Martin? And Martin O'Neill's like, excuse me, Bertie? And he's like, do you like Doug's, son? And Martin O'Neill's like, no, I'm not really a big fan of dogs, but Geraldine, my wife, she loves dogs. And he goes, I remember my first dog, son. He says, my ma came to us just before Christmas and said, what do you want for Christmas, Bert? And he said, I'd fucking love a dog, mum. And my ma says, a dog, brilliant, Bert. What kind of dog would you like? And he went, I'd love a coconut dog. And she says, a coconut dog? She says, I've never heard of that. He says, are you sure that's right? Is it not a spaniel or a cocker spaniel or a bulldog you like? And he goes, no, it's a coconut dog, ma. And she says, where have you heard this, Bert? He says, I was at the bus stop with Auntie Jean, and she says to Auntie Mary, for fuck's sake, Mary, would you look at the coconut dog?
I remember coming down the tunnel at Ibrox, and John Gregg was standing across from me, and Greggy says, what's your bonus a day, wee man? I says, 3 quid. He says, we're on 6. I says, but I'm fucking guaranteed 3.
Catholic Church and Honors Lodge had this sports quiz in a big hall, and it was really jam-packed through, all the tickets was sold. And the quiz master says, right, both teams ready, sit down, fingers in the button. First question. Who was the first British club to win the European Cup? Catholic Church in right away. Bzzz. Celtic, 2 points. Second question. Who was the Scottish team that won 9 championships in the trot? Catholic Church in right away. Bzzz. Catholic Church. Celtic, 4 points. So the chairman of the Honors Lodge stood up. He says, excuse me, quizmaster. He says, I think these questions are favouring the opposition. So the quizmaster says, sit down, your time will come. Teams ready? Yes? Fingers in the button. Third question. Who scored the League Cup goal for Rangers? On the legend right away. What League Cup final? He says, won your mate 7-1.
So how would the present day Rangers fare against the Celtic side of the 60s?
Well, I think it's a half game. They'd only beat them 2-1 because somebody's deserved 50 now, aren't they?
I never get tired talking. I never get tired getting into their company, the supporters' company, because their grandfathers and their grandparents and that, and then their fathers, and then now it's the sons.
and they all have one thing in common. They're Celtic supporters, and that's what they want to talk about, you know. I miss all my friends. I miss them now. We slept in the same room, we ate at the same table. A lot of great times. Yeah. They'll never ever be forgotten.
And believe it or believe it not, I'm no the happiest man sitting in tunnels, standing in tunnels, and I was desperate to get out. And all of a sudden, we needed something to relax us, and wee Bertie hit it right on the head. He started singing the Celtic song. And before we knew where we were all joined in and singing the Celtic song. And I had a look at some of these Italian boys, and they were astounded. They were astounded. And I think that gave us just a wee plus before we even got onto the pitch. But we stopped here for what seemed an eternity. It must have only been for a minute or two just to have got the signal to come out onto the pitch. And it was fabulous. And wee Bertie, how he thought about what it was and what was needed, I don't know. But singing the Celtic song put us all right in the mood for the game. Fabulous it was.
For it's a grand old team to play for it's a grand old team to see. And when you know its history, it's enough to make your heart go, oh, 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 oh. We had that every game, every bus. We had that from start to finish. Honestly. See the dressing room windows. Jock opened the dressing room windows and you heard these songs. Second nature.